My name is Curtis, and until a few days ago, I believed my marriage was stable and happy. While I knew we weren't perfect, I trusted that we were strong and trustworthy. However, recent events have proven me wrong. It all began on an ordinary evening when my wife Lorna started to seem distant. I attributed her behavior to work stress, as we were both going through demanding times. To try and reconnect, I planned a weekend trip, hoping it would bring us closer together. But before I could discuss it with her, I returned home late one night after finishing a project at the office. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked outside, causing a wave of unease to wash over me. Despite the feeling, I pushed it aside, thinking she may have had a friend over or that it was something harmless. I had no reason to doubt her, or at least that's what I kept telling myself as I entered the house. But everything felt off. The atmosphere was quiet yet tinged with an unsettling energy that made my skin crawl. An invisible tension that I could sense rather than see. And then I heard it. Laughter. It was unmistakably hers, but there was another voice as well, a deep and familiar one belonging to a man. As I followed the sound, my heart raced faster with each step. When I finally reached the living room and turned the corner, I found myself frozen in place. Lorna was seated on the couch, leaning in close to a man I immediately recognized as Nolan. While we weren't particularly close, I knew him well enough from his work with her. We had crossed paths at office events and gatherings, always under the assumption that he was just a colleague and nothing more. But the way they were gazing at each other spoke volumes. My initial reaction wasn't one of anger or sadness. Instead, I felt a surreal numbness, as if my mind was struggling to comprehend what my eyes were revealing. I stood there observing my wife lighting up in response to something another man had said. The way she touched his arm, the intimacy of it all, it was unmistakable. I didn't make a sound. I didn't storm in. I didn't throw accusations. Instead, I did something I never imagined I would do. I took off my wedding ring. Lorna finally noticed me. Her eyes widened, shock flickering across her face as she scrambled to straighten up. "Curtis," she started, but I didn't let her finish. I walked forward, calm, too calm, and I placed the ring right on the coffee table between them. "You dropped this somewhere along the way," I said, my voice steady. Nolan stiffened. He knew I had caught them. But Lorna, she hesitated, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to find the right words. "Curtis, wait." But I was already turning away. My hands weren't shaking. My voice hadn't cracked. I felt nothing, or maybe I felt too much, so much that my body just shut down. I walked to the door, but before I stepped out, I looked back just once. "You might want to figure out how to explain this," I said, "because whatever you believed, it was the end." The moment came, and then I departed. Uncertain of what lay ahead, the unexpected unfolded. Instead of heading home after that, it wasn't due to lacking a destination, but a reluctance to return. The concept of home suddenly felt alien. The residence where I had constructed a life with Lorna now seemed contaminated, as if it belonged to another. Driving without a clear path, the city lights blended together as my thoughts raced. The scenario replayed incessantly. Her leaning in, her laughter, Nolan's blatant lack of remorse. Yet the peculiar thing? Anger eluded me. Perhaps it was shock, or my mind hadn't grasped the gravity of the situation. Rather than fury, a disconcerting tranquility enveloped me, as if observing my life unravel from afar. Eventually, I pulled into a late-night diner, reminiscent of the old days with its flickering neon signs and a seasoned waitress. Since the 80s, I have been sitting in a booth by the window sipping coffee and gazing out into the dark night. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. It was Lorna. I chose not to pick up. The phone buzzed again with another message. It was a text from Lorna, asking me to come back so we could talk. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Talk now? Where was this urgency when she was too busy with Nolan acting like a schoolgirl? I placed my phone face down on the table, taking a slow sip of coffee, hoping for comfort that never came. Time passed, maybe an hour, and then another message appeared that made my stomach sink. The text read, "Curtis, please. He's gone. Just come home." I remained silent, staring at the message, trying to make sense of it. He's gone. Did she kick him out? Did he leave voluntarily? And why did it sound like she was on her own? A part of me desired to see her discomfort, to make her confront her guilt in silence. But curiosity prevailed. I settled the bill, returned to my car, and started driving. I didn't text her back because I forgave her or because I was prepared to talk. Something about that message just didn't feel right to me. As I pulled into the driveway, I immediately noticed the absence of the other car that had been there earlier. The house was dark except for a solitary light in the living room. Through the window, I could see her pacing. Upon stepping inside, her whole body seemed to relax in relief at the sight of me. "Curtis," she exhaled, as if she had been holding her breath for hours. I remained silent, simply closing the door behind me and crossing my arms, waiting. She hesitated before moving a step closer. "He left as soon as you walked out." "He left?" I nodded, showing no emotion. "Good for him," I remarked with a sharp undertone. Lorna winced at my tone. "I didn't intend for you to find out like that," she confessed. I let out a dry laugh. "So what you did mean for me to find out, but in a different way." Her expression crumbled. "No, I never wanted you to find out at all." "Wrong answer," I clenched. My jaw clenched with a flicker of anger as she shook her head quickly, tears welling in her eyes. "No, Curtis, I messed up, okay? I made a mistake." I tilted my head, questioning the length of this mistake. "How long?" Her throat bobbed with the effort to speak. Then she finally confessed, "A few months." I exhaled slowly, feeling betrayed by her deceit over many months, while I had believed we just needed a weekend getaway. She reached out towards me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. "Don't, Curtis, please," she whispered. "It didn't mean anything, I swear. It was stupid. I was stupid." I looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time in a decade, and she felt like a stranger to me. With a calm yet intimidating voice, I took a step closer and said, "You have one chance to tell me the truth. No more lies, no more sugarcoating." Her eyes widened as she stood frozen, unable to speak. I scrutinized her closely, waiting for her facade to crumble. And crumble it did, the tears, the guilt, the trembling hands, all fading away. For a brief moment, a different expression flickered across her face, one that was icy and calculating. In that instant, I realized she wasn't remorseful. She was afraid, not of losing me, but of the consequences that lay ahead. I stood silently observing Lorna, hoping to hear words that would restore my faith in her, that would convince me the woman I had married still existed beneath the betrayal. But her eyes betrayed her true feelings. She wasn't devastated for hurting me, she wasn't disintegrating over our shattered marriage. She was terrified because of the uncertainty of what I might do next. That realization struck me harder than anything else. "Why now?" I finally inquired, my voice steady. "Why tonight? Why him?" She let out a trembling breath, rubbing her arms as if seeking solace from a chill. "Curtis, I raised a hand to stop her. "No. None of that. No, I didn't mean to. No, it was a mistake. Tell me the truth," she said, her jaw tight. Then, after a prolonged silence, she whispered, "Because I wanted to see if I still could." I blinked in confusion. "What?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears and her lips trembling. But I no longer fell for her words. "I wanted to see if I still had something. I don't even know how to explain it, Curtis," she continued. "I felt like we were just going through the motions and I needed to feel wanted. I didn't plan this, it just happened." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Months, Lorna? You're telling me you accidentally ended up in someone else's arms for months?" The expression on her face crumbled. "I don't love him," she said. That statement made me pause, not because I cared about her feelings for him, but because I realized what she had not expressed. She hadn't said she loved me either. I let the weight of that realization hang heavy in the suffocating silence between us. After a moment, I broke the silence, saying, "You know, I came back here tonight hoping to hear something that made sense. Something that would at least explain why you decided to throw everything away." She took a hesitant step forward. I looked at Curtis as I took a step back. "No," I said sharply. "You don't get to reach out to me now, not after this." Her hands dropped to her sides. Running a hand through my hair, I exhaled slowly. "So what now? What's the plan?" I pressed. "You said Nolan left. Is it for good or just until you can figure out how to fix this mess?" Lorna flinched. "I told him to go," she hesitated. "Why?" I probed. A humorless chuckle escaped me. "Because you got caught, or because you actually want to make things right?" Her silence spoke volumes. Turning towards the door, I paused as Lorna urgently pleaded, "Curtis, please don't go. Stay. Let's talk this out." Reluctantly, I faced her, allowing the wariness and disappointment to show on my face. "Talk about what?" I whispered. "How to pretend none of this happened? How to go back to how things were?" She swallowed hard. Shaking my head, I spoke softly. "You still don't understand, do you?" Her lip trembled. Shaking Curtis, she choked back tears. You shattered us." I murmured, "I understand." Moving closer, my tone firm. "No, you don't comprehend. You can't fathom the agony of realizing the person you trusted was a facade. Every moment I believed in you was a mockery." Her sobs echoed in the room, but I held back, refraining from consoling her this time. "You've made your decision," I asserted, "so have I." With that, I silently opened the door and stepped into the brisk night air, feeling a sense of liberation I hadn't experienced in years. Little did I know what was to transpire next. I didn't drive far that night, navigating the roads with clenched fists and a tumultuous mind. Memories of our shared past clashed with the harsh truth of her betrayal. Eventually, I found myself parked outside a dimly lit budget motel, its flickering neon sign signaling vacancy in the stillness. I checked in, the weight of the recent events settling in. Without any conscious thought, with only a vague recollection of my interaction with the man at reception, I found myself seeking a place to catch my breath. A place untouched by the lingering remnants of my failed marriage. Resting on the uncomfortable mattress, gazing up at the ceiling, I anticipated a surge of anger, a visceral rage that would drive me to want to release my frustrations, to shout, to demand answers that would never be provided. Yet that explosion of emotion never arrived. Instead, a profound sense of emptiness enveloped me. At some point, I must have drifted off as I awoke to the buzzing of my phone. Squinting against the harsh light of the screen, I noticed the name Lorna. Choosing to ignore her messages, the texts continued to flood in. "Curtis, please just tell me where you are," followed by, "I don't want to lose you." A bitter chuckle escaped my lips. It was far too late for such pleas, my dear. Disregarding the subsequent messages, I carelessly tossed my phone onto the nightstand and massaged my temples. How does one even begin to unravel a decade-long marriage in the span of a single night? Obviously, divorce was the answer. But the question lingered. Where does one start in extricating oneself from such a bank accounts, the friends we once had in common? They all morphed into a daunting obstacle course that I needed to navigate. Lost in contemplation, a sudden knock at the door startled me. I hesitated, my heart racing as I rose from my seat and cautiously approached the peephole. To my surprise, it was Lorna. My breath caught in my chest. How had she managed to track me down? Suspicion gnawed at me as I reluctantly opened the door just a crack to peer at her face. She appeared weary and disheveled, her eyes reflecting a turmoil of emotions. "Curtis," she whispered, a mix of anxiety and relief evident in her tone. "Thank heavens I found you." I raised a hand to halt her words. "How did you find me?" She nervously admitted, "Your location is still connected to my phone from when we shared our accounts." I needed to speak to you." I let out a resigned sigh. "There's nothing to discuss. Please." Her voice wavered as she pleaded, "Just hear me out." Part of me wanted to shut the door and walk away without a second thought. However, against my instincts, I reluctantly stepped aside to allow her entry. Lorna hesitated as she crossed the threshold, her movements cautious, as if she knew she didn't belong there, hugging herself tightly as she spoke. "Curtis, I know I hurt you and I can't undo it, but I was planning to break things off with him," she explained nervously. "I was just scared," she added dismissively. "Scared of what exactly?" I questioned. "That he wouldn't want you after I left." Her expression twisted in pain. "No, scared of losing us," she admitted sadly. "You lost us the moment you decided I wasn't enough," I replied, feeling my heart ache. Tears welled in her eyes as she continued, "I hate myself for this. I wish I could go back and undo everything." I gazed at her, trying to find a glimmer of truth in her words. Part of me wanted to believe her, that this was just a mistake that could be rectified, but then she admitted a crucial detail. She sniffled, wiped her tears, and whispered, "I already told Nolan it was over." I froze. "You told him?" I echoed. "So it wasn't over before I caught you?" Lorna's breath caught. I mean, I was going to end it," she faltered. I let out a bitter laugh, running a hand over my face in disbelief. "Wow, just wow. Curtis, please." He pleaded, "I don't want to lose you." Taking a closer look at her, I realized she wasn't here out of love for me, but because she was losing control and despised it. With a deep breath, I reached into my pocket and felt the cold metal. Silently, I removed my wedding ring, held it up between us, and set it on the nightstand. Lorna's expression crumpled. "Curtis," I met her gaze, my tone firm. "You don't have to lose me, Lorna." Stepping back towards the door, I opened it knowing I was never truly hers. She let out a choked sob, but I didn't linger for a response. Walking out, I left my past behind. Thinking it was the end, I was unaware of what awaited me next. Leaving Lorna in that motel room wasn't the end of it. She wasn't finished with me yet. The following days passed in a haze. I tried to resume my routine, pretending I wasn't carrying a tempest within me. The weight of what happened clung to me like a second skin everywhere I went. I felt like people could see it on me. The betrayal, the exhaustion, the emptiness. Lorna kept texting, calling, but I ignored her. Then came the emails. At first, they were the same desperate pleas. "Please, please talk to me. Please, don't do this. I love you. It was a mistake." But then the messages changed. One morning, I found a single sentence in my inbox. "I need to tell you the truth about Nolan." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Against my better judgment, I typed out a response. "I don't care. Don't contact me again." Less than 5 minutes later, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but some morbid curiosity made me pick up. Lorna's voice came through the line, small and shaky. "Curtis, please just hear me out." I sighed. "You've got 2 minutes." There was a pause. Then she whispered I wasn't the only one. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Nolan has a history of being involved with other women, particularly those he works with," she revealed. "I wasn't special to him. I was just another name on his list." Her hand ran down her face as she continued. "Does that change anything?" I asked. She hesitated before responding. "No, but you should know that one of those women was married to your boss." Shocked, I sat up straight. "What did you just say?" She sniffled and revealed her name is Melissa. "She's been married to Greg for 10 years, and he has been having an affair with her just like he did with me." I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Greg wasn't just my boss. He was one of my closest friends. He was the man who had supported me and stood by me in tough times, the one who had considered me family. And now his wife was entangled with the same man who had ruined my marriage. The room started to spin around me. "You're lying," I said with disbelief. She let out a bitter laugh. "I wish I was, but if you don't believe me, ask Greg yourself." I ended the call without another word, feeling a mix of emotions and thoughts rushing through my mind. Since this nightmare began, I found myself not just struggling with my own betrayal, but also on the brink of involving someone else in the chaos, with no clue about the revelations that lay ahead. Holding the phone tightly, my thoughts whirled frantically. Greg, a man whom I deeply admired, who had been my constant supporter for years, preaching about loyalty, trust, and hard work, was unaware that his wife was involved with the same man who had shattered my own marriage. Faced with 2 options, I pondered whether to simply walk away, conceal this truth, and allow Greg to discover it on his own as I had, or to do what nobody did for me. With unwavering hands, I dialed his number. The phone rang and Greg's familiar voice greeted me, unsuspecting and casual. "Curtis, my man, what's up?" For a split second, I hesitated, then spoke firmly. "We need to talk. Now." Instantly his tone shifted. "What's wrong?" I replied, "Not over the phone. Meet me at Raisin 20. After a moment of silence, Greg agreed. "I'll be there." Upon my arrival at the nearly deserted diner, I sat in a booth at the back, hands clenched together, rehearsing the words in my mind. How does one inform a man that his "Remember that colleague who's always been friendly with you at work? Well, he's been involved with your wife." Greg entered the room 10 minutes later, looking puzzled. Taking the seat across from me, he placed his phone on the table and asked, "What's wrong?" Taking a deep breath, I replied, "It's about Melissa." Furrowing his brow, Greg inquired, "What about her?" Meeting his gaze directly, I disclosed, "She's having an affair." Greg froze, the silence heavy between us. After a moment, he let out a bitter laugh. "Is this a joke?" I shook my head as his expression turned stern. Leaning in closer, I uttered, "It's Nolan." At the mention of the name, Greg's demeanor shifted noticeably. His eyes darkened and his jaw tightened. "You're lying," he stated flatly, with a hint of anger in his voice. Retrieving my phone, I displayed Laura's last message and pushed it toward Greg. "Read this." Greg stared at the message on the screen, his expression revealing a mix of emotions. The realization settled in as his grip around the phone tightened and his nostrils flared. Without a word, he rose from his seat. "Greg," I called out, but he was already on the move. Hastily, I threw some cash on the table and followed him outside. "Where are you going?" I demanded, but he ignored my questions. I managed to grab his arm and forced him to face me. "Greg, please don't do anything rash," I pleaded. His eyes held a dangerous intensity. "Don't presume to know what I want, Curtis," he said sharply. "Believe me, I understand how this feels." I cautioned, "You can't act impulsively." Greg's hands clenched into fists. "So I just let her walk away?" I shook my head. "No, but don't rush into this blindly." His jaw tightened. "Then what do you propose?" I didn't have a ready answer, but I knew this wasn't the end of it. Greg paced anxiously, his fists tightening and loosening as his breathing grew erratic. The turmoil in his eyes mirrored a familiar inner struggle. I understood the pain of betrayal. It doesn't just hurt. It alters you in ways you least expect. "Is there something buried inside you causing you to question everything?" "We must have proof," I finally declared. Greg paused in his tracks, turning to face me. "Proof? What more evidence do I need than this?" he questioned, waving my phone in the air. "Your wife confessed. Isn't that sufficient?" I shook my head. "It's not. If you confront her armed only with my word and a text message, she will deny it, distort the truth, and make you out to be the villain." Greg's jaw clenched. He didn't want to acknowledge it, but deep down he knew I was right. After a prolonged silence, he sighed heavily. "So what is our next move?" I hesitated briefly, then, without allowing myself time to reconsider, I dialed a number on my phone. It rang twice before a voice answered. "Didn't expect to hear from you again." So soon? Lorna's voice sounded uncertain. Greg tensed at the mention of her name. "I need you to do something for me," I stated flatly. There was a moment of silence, then hesitantly, "What?" I took a deep breath. "Meet me right away." Another pause, then "Where?" I glanced at Greg and he nodded in agreement. "At your place," I informed her, "and don't forget your phone. You are going to call Nolan." We sat in the car waiting. Our parked across the street from my old house where the lights were on. Inside I could see Lorna pacing and Greg tapping the steering wheel impatiently beside me. He asked, "You sure she'll do it?" I nodded, replying that she was desperate to make things right and that she would call him. A few minutes later, I received a text from Lorna saying, "Hun's picking up, listen in." I put her on speaker and the call clicked on. Lorna Nolan's voice sounded cautious as she asked, "You need to tell me the truth. How many women have there been?" Nolan hesitated before replying, "Does it matter?" Greg tensed next to me. Lorna snapped back, "Yes, it matters. Were you with Melissa?" After a pause, Nolan nonchalantly retorted, "You really want the list, sweetheart? Because trust me, you weren't special." Greg's reaction was intense, gripping the dashboard tightly. Lorna's voice cracked as she said, "I trusted you." Nolan chuckled, saying, "That's on you then, isn't it?" Lorna's breath hitched as she questioned, "And what about Curtis?" "What a boo." Greg Nolan chuckled softly. "Curtis, come on. Did you really think I was worried about him finding out?" "He was never going to know," Greg remarked. "And as for Melissa, well, she's had her fun. I don't see why she should stop now." With determination, Greg flung open the car door and strode towards the house, leaving me scrambling to keep up. Lorna opened the door just as Greg approached the porch, her eyes filled with fear. "Greg, wait," she began, but he brushed past her, making a beeline for the kitchen, where Melissa stood frozen, her phone still in hand, and her face drained of color at the sight of him. "Greg," she started, but he cut her off with a stern look. "Don't. Just don't," he said firmly. Melissa's lips moved, yet no words escaped. She knew. And then, without another word, Greg slid off his wedding ring, placing it on the counter before exiting the house. I trailed behind him as we returned to the porch. Greg let out a slow exhale. "I'm done," he declared. I simply nodded in agreement. Standing there in silence, two men who had just lost everything, I somehow felt a sense of liberation for the first time in ages. Greg and I stood side by side, both carrying the heavy weight of the consequences of our actions. In the chill of the night, the gravity of recent events sinking in. It was all over. No more deceit, no more treachery, no more grasping onto a shattered past. Greg exhaled deeply and faced me. So what now? I mustered a weary smile. Now we move ahead, he retorted. Forward sounds simple when you say it. I shrugged. It's not easy, but it beats remaining ensnared in this chaos. A sense of shift resonated within me for the first time in days. Despite the lingering anger and hurt, a new feeling emerged: relief. The ensuing weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, difficult discussions, and navigating my way out of the life I had shared with Lorna. She made attempts, calling, texting, pleading for a conversation, but I stood firm. I refused to let her re-enter my life. I secured a modest apartment on the other side of town, unadorned but mine. No specters of the past, no reminders of a love tainted by deception, just a clean slate. Greg and I maintained communication as I embarked on this new chapter. It turned out that going through something like that with someone creates a bond unlike any other. We enjoyed drinks, shared divorce lawyer horror stories, and even found humor in the madness of it all. One evening at the bar, Greg playfully nudged my arm and asked, "So when are you jumping back into the dating scene?" I raised an eyebrow and quit back where. He smirked and teased, "You know, dating the thing people do when they're not married to cheating spouses." I chuckled and shook my head, replying, "Not anytime soon." Greg urged me on, saying, "Come on, not all women are like them." I took a deep breath and admitted, "I know. I just need time." And for the first time, I truly meant it. I wasn't bitter, I wasn't shutting people out, and I wasn't going to let my past define me indefinitely. I simply needed space to rediscover myself, and I was at peace with that. A year later, my life had transformed completely. New job, new apartment, newfound tranquility. One morning at a coffee shop, I bumped into Greg, who was sitting across from a woman I hadn't met before, and he was grinning from ear to ear. He raised an eyebrow, flashing a grin as he mouthed later. Surprisingly, I found myself genuinely happy for him. Betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. It has the power to mold you into a stronger person. Sometimes losing everything can lead you to discovering your true self.